All
Absolutely
right.
fire. Perfect. Excellent. Excellent. Okay. So the date. What day? I'm not seeing it visibly. Did I miss it on the
Uh,
trailer?
it, it is January 10th.
Ah, you knew it. You called it.
So I got that one right. I got another date wrong later on, so we'll get
Oh,
there.
okay. Okay.
The stuff that was shown there, when you said that was the first, that was actually the Alliance raid.
Okay. So that
A
was the
lot of that
part of
was
that.
from MSQ and Dungeon.
Mm-hmm.
The Allegan stuff with Dalamud and all that, that's all Deep Dungeon.
Ooh.
Um, and yeah, there was some Lopreet stuff because we're getting the new tribal quests, and then of course Omega is the ultimate. So you're right there. So if you scroll down through all the trailer screenshots they grabbed, um, we end up with the date January 10th,
Very cool. Very nice.
patch 6.3.
I love the artwork. I'm gonna just kind of call it out here, as you see with like Zero and kind of this scythe and how it has then the crystal tower in this regards, and so you kind of see the contrast. Like I think that is, I think, a really cool design. Interestingly enough, though, like the shading and the and some of that shine from the crystal tower being put onto the warrior light there. I just think that is just phenomenal work right here. Looks phenomenal.
So the deep dungeon actually is underneath the crystal tower.
Oh, that's
That's what,
not Eureka. So that's like
that's what it
that's
looks
what
like.
that's
That's
what
what
it's
it
called
looks
though.
like. It's called a
Yeah,
basement floor, and we
right.
do it, and we meet in Mordona.
So this is essentially because, like in Final Fantasy, like lore overall, Eureka was originally under the Crystal Tower. So if that is essentially where they're not connecting it with what we called Eureka, but actually then going south of the Crystal Tower, going down into the further depths of it, that's awesome. I like that a lot. That's cool.
So that appears to be the case. Of course, those trailers are all available in the languages, and they started by going over everything we know is in the patch from both part one and
Mm-hmm.
from just the patterns that Final Fantasy 14 offers and its current iteration of patterns, which means that Tataru's Grand Endeavor continues. Everything that we learned,
Yeah,
more
this.
relic stuff. They show off the Laborites,
Mm-hmm.
the new crafting area, and so that looks very fun. Uh, so that should be nice and joking. The trial will be an MSQ trial, which is exciting. And then we have the Alliance raid being Euphrosyne. And then, of course, they do reveal right then and there, they confirm that it is the Omega Protocol Ultimate, which will launch 2 weeks after. So that'll be when everybody who's wondering, like, how come 14 doesn't have more people watching on Twitch? Well, why don't you check in on January 24th? Because that's gonna be really exciting.
Yeah, if you're doing story on the 10th, though, I think we'll probably still see that
Yeah,
a kind of a reduction in directory, because that's just how
that's
Final
okay.
Fantasy 14 functions. That's not a bad thing. That's literally like, it's something so fascinating, and I think we'll continue to see more and more MMOs maybe even adopt that, because even within like New World and other games, people are like, "Oh, spoilers," and it's like, "Oh wow, yeah, like cutscene could be considered a spoiler." You gotta kind of put on trying to think about how other people perceive what they're seeing
So
on screen.
so the bosses actually, so you're clicking through the slides pretty fast.
Oh, I'm sorry.
So the bosses in the deep dungeon are actually going to feel more like real bosses as opposed to previous deep dungeons. They want them to feel like actual bosses.
Oh, okay.
So it should be really fun to watch people progress. It'll be iterative on previous deep dungeons. So if you've enjoyed Palace of the Dead and Heaven on High, they expect you to enjoy this. And if you didn't enjoy those, I think that's kind of a red flag. But it should feel like the biggest and most robust version without kind of taking it in an entirely two new direction. As we look at the duty support for Heaven's Word, this is now, as Yoshi said, everything that's in the free trial if the free trial doesn't get extended.
Hmm. You think they're going to
So
take the free trial all the way through Stormblood?
that's Yoshipi's exact words. This should cover the free trial if the free trial doesn't get extended. So the idea that maybe as we look at 7.0, you start to say, you know what? We would still have Shadowbringers and Endwalker as kind of that more premium experience, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
We could let free players go all the way to Stormblood, which would give them access to, honestly, more importantly, in my opinion, to more jobs. I think when people watch the game for a while, they know that they don't have access to the end game, that they would need to clear some things. So people know that. They don't always know what they're getting into, but they always know that it's somewhere in the distance. But
Yeah.
what sucks is when you see somebody that's playing in a way that looks really cool, and that's like your class fantasy,
Right.
and you're like, okay, so how do I at least do the beginning parts of what you're doing? And you're like, oh, you can't.
You can't.
And
Well,
so
that's also one of the things that. So I have a lot of thoughts, a lot of mixed thoughts on the extension of the free trial, because essentially then it makes me wonder, like, do you ever advocate to give Square Enix money? Because if they continue to make the game like free, where as long as you don't hand them money, then you could keep playing the game in theory. To at some point, do you see the free trial going to Shadowbringers, etc.? But the other thing about Stormblood that would be nice in the positive sense is that, unlike Heavensward, you don't have to beat ARR just to get access to the new jobs. Where in Heavensward, you have to go through all the patch to get into Ishgard. So with Stormblood, you just have to hit level 50 and have, I think it's Prey. Like, so there's like a much easier form of access. So somebody who is maybe working their way towards Heavensward all of a sudden would have Red Mage, all of a sudden would have Astrologian, you know, so it's like they would have access. No, Astrologian was, sorry, that was Heavensward. It was Red Mage and, why am I drawing a blank?
Samurai,
thank you. So they'd have access to those two jobs, which I think would be pretty freaking exciting for especially new players who want to try it out. What do you think about that? Like, because Heavensward is like such an offering. Going to Stormblood, do you have positive, negative? How do you feel?
I mean, the other way to go at it is to do what WoW does, where you don't buy old expansions. So you remove the complete edition altogether.
Yeah.
And then you say the free trial gets you to taste the game, and then you just activate your subscription.
Yeah.
That's it. You just activate your subscription, and that's plenty. That's the other way to come at it, right? Is say you can start paying us for the months that you want to play. You can stop at any time. But you need to treat this like a gym membership that maybe also sells access to their personal trainers or something. It's like there are more premium ways, but at a base subscription level. And especially if that subscription starts to be like, and that subscription also includes Final Fantasy 11 and things like that. And the fact that these subscription costs don't really go up by $1 or anything, inflation just makes these cheaper and cheaper. It's been 10 years since A Realm Reborn. So when you talk about that,
I've always just wondered, though,
for the same price, you're no longer going to have to buy expansions to keep your progress going. You know, it's also going to include 11. Maybe we also start to throw in a third retainer or something like that. It just gets easier and easier and easier.
The thing that I've always wondered, especially about this game and that free trial, it ends up wondering, like, would they ever have an offering that says, okay, to be a part of Shadowbringers and Endwalker and 7.0, you have to be subbed. But if anything prior to that, it's an optional sub. You don't have access to the retainer, so you can't like impact the market. But it's like, just buy the game. Just like, hey, if you bought in the game today for $20 or $40 or whatever the game version is, don't worry. Like, if you're not in Shadowbringers now, then like, yeah, we're not going to ask you for a monthly sub. Just go ahead and play. And like the mental math on it is like, it's so that like they're giving so much value to the player with the free trial that it's like, it seems kind of like, hey, I want to thank you with money. Thanks so much for making Heavensward. I really had a great experience. But then what I have seen people kind of there who maybe aren't aware, they're enjoying the journey and they're like, oh, this is great. I want to go ahead and buy it. Now you're locked into a subscription if you want to continue playing, where it's like, oh, don't give Square Enix $1, like, please, so you can play all the way through. Now would be theoretically Stormblood. It's just like, I wonder if there is a third option of like an evolution of their monetization strategy. Because if they keep making the base game free and free and free, unless you give them money and then you're having to get locked into that subscription, I wonder if there's like a third avenue in which that it kind of makes a little bit better sense.
I don't know. I think I think the people who see the value in the subscription and the consistent service and the fact that we've gotten things like 75 live letters and we had like half a dozen interviews go live this week and we're getting all this content. We're about to go into 3 fan fests and the symphonies are back and the symphonies are doing a world tour and all this stuff we'll talk about here as we get through the rest of this. Like you start to see the real value of the subscription. So I would rather not try to draw some line between people who are trying to stretch out their free experience. I get that you want to try the game. I totally respect that. And I think a sampling there is fair. But I do think if you start moving into where there's a free to play model and then there's a buy to play model and then the premium is the subscription, you start to be like, why would you ever subscribe? And I would just rather say, like, I don't know, I'm very much a buy once, cry once type mentality. Like if it's going to be hard to get a piece of bad news, don't give me half the bad news and then wait later and go, okay, so here's the rest of the bad news. Just tell me all the bad news. So if a subscription is something I'm like, I don't know if that's for me, just give me the subscription. Like, just tell me what it's going to be. What I don't want is, yeah, then you just pay $20 and then you just pay 10 more and then you just pay 40 more. Okay, from here on out, it's a subscription. You should just told me that from the get-go. Now I feel like you strung me along and I'm $100 in over these buy-to-play features and now you want a subscription? No. Just tell me from the get-go that that's your model. If you want to say, hey, old expansions, there's a legacy subscription that gets you all the way up to Shadowbringers, and that's $8 a month and it's going to double. But get me in that mentality
of paying every month,
paying every month, so that I don't feel like, okay, well, now that you've got $100 on your account, if you want more, you should start paying me every month. That feels really deceitful to me. But that could just be my own opinion. I'd rather just do it.
Yeah, I think the subscription model is the best.
First. Congratulations, Echo. Woo! Sorry to interrupt. That's very exciting. There was a real
You said it was happening this week, though.
Yeah, but it was already day 9, and there was a real question if it was going to be beatable without nerfs. And so I don't know, did they end up with nerfs? I think there were some like single-digit percentage clears, but there was a real question with were they going to be able to do it. Congratulations, Echo. Turns out that stalling really did work because they did some heavy stalling in the beginning. So people who are memeing on them for doing 67,000 splits for like a half item level gain. I don't know. Turns out stalling is the best content in all forms of Twitch. The trick to Twitch is people like, oh, so you just play video games all day. No. You want to play as little video games as possible. You've been misunderstanding the whole thing. Ideally, no video games are occurring.
They're somewhere behind you.
yeah, like over here.
They are the mechanism. That's man, dude. That's really cool. Really fascinating. And being that he's hinting that, like, I don't know if that means that we're gonna see it anytime soon. But I honestly, like, based off of Yoshi P's history and track record, I think he's kind of laying the grounds, because no matter what, there's going to be people who have kind of like a process, you know, it may take time to process. So in this way, let's say they do decide to drop that news, you know, come 7.0, I think that's right. Like, hey guys, like we were talking about it, you know, for a while now. Everybody's had chance to get excited about it, to grieve it, or to start coming up with new memes, where it's like now including the critically acclaimed Stormblood. So that's going to be really exciting to see for players, especially those who maybe were on the free trial and have beat Heaven's Word, and then they're like, all right, I'll wait, you know, and they're just going to end up being, you know, several years behind it, but they can still experience it overall.
I mean, it already feels like when you're in ARR, a lot of people are going to go, it gets better. And like going through Stormblood, it feels like people are going to go, yeah, but the best expansion's behind the money. So like it just like, that's just going to kick that out. Right. So I don't know. At the end of the day, we're debating something that doesn't really change the world.
Yeah. And essentially when 8.0 comes out, if they add in, you know, Shadowbringers, like honestly, that would be the pattern. If they kept it locked at Heaven's Word and didn't move forward, it's like, that's a great free trial. Like you have a great offering to see if you're going to enjoy this game or not. And then essentially, if this is what happens, it's like, I would say, like, yeah, if you never feel like paying a subscription, never hand Square Enix $1 and you're just going to be, you know, 4 or 6 years behind. Not a big deal. Like, it's a heck of a value. So it'll be interesting to see. So what else? Yeah. Did they go through the Paladin job adjustments?
They did, but that'll be in the second half.
Okay.
And so we'll go over that in a minute. The crafting and gathering updates, we are getting tool enhancements. It looks like they require you to do a fair bit of the stuff on the first, and so I do wonder if that's going to end up being something tied to the first, which kind of kicks that idea for that Garlemald restoration firmly out of contention. Mm-hmm. In my opinion, there was still some speculation of maybe it happens, maybe it doesn't. And then the spearfishing in Upper Lenosha, Yushbi said was something that the devs did. Another one of those things that like people were like, hey, this is really possible. In
That's
old
always good.
zones, it's
Yeah.
not that hard. And so he goes, so be sure to share that out on Twitter and things like that. If you're really excited about these zones, share your screenshots and all that. If you want them to keep going on that, because that's not something we're going to make a real priority of. But they'll talk about Java adjustments and all that in a bit. And then Island Sanctuary updates. Not something that was the content that immediately grabbed you and me, but something that is exciting people. And a lot of these quality of life adjustments are the things that people were building, like the spreadsheets and stuff like that. A lot of that's already in game. So very fast turnaround on the feedback. So they either saw this coming, or they are very fast at getting this in game. Same with the paladin adjustments when we do talk about that. That feels very, very quick for how big those changes ended up being. They did show a little bit on the treasure hunt, so not as, like, we'll talk about that in a bit. Housing update. With patch 6.3, the additional housing awards, housing demolition is turning back on, and there will be additional awards as well. So, but what they did is things like Dynamis and Materia did not get the new awards, and they're holding on to those until I think their existing wards fill out a little more. So due to them already having wards that aren't full, they're like, why don't you, right? Very much like saying, hey, why don't you finish the food on your plate? I'm happy to get you more. I'd be happy to give you as many seconds and thirds as you want. But how about you finish what's there first? And then we can talk about more. And so I think that gives them that kind of like, I think World of Warcraft really loves the term ripcord. I'm sure some people can grimace when I say that, but this idea that later there is a little bit of cushion, a little bit of an airbag for those DCs that haven't filled theirs out, I guess, as opposed to, you'll notice that the ones that aren't on there are a lot of these like legacy NA ones where like it's just absolutely slammed. There's nothing available.
Okay.
So very cool. And then the lodestone post will go over how many
details. 18. Yeah, there's 1800s per like server or something like that.
That's great.
Massive. Hopefully people can get their house. Like that's the thing I always found myself like always like like you can't like there's no fix, right? There's nothing I'm like, oh, you've been trying to get a house for months. Well, hopefully now will be a good opportunity as more and more plots open up, and so if you've always wanted to get a house, this might actually be the time, if you're especially on a break, to return. But also if you're on a break and you don't want to lose your house with demo being turned back on, just pay attention. Just make sure that you're not caught, in your house getting demolished, especially if you worked very hard to get one.
So, UI updates. They actually show a little bit of this, so we'll get to see this in a bit. But they went over kind of what all of this is, and there's a couple in the next slide that get kind of exciting.
Okay.
So, first of all, we have the expansion of available activities for fashion accessories. And this kind of confused people because this is like, can you now do emotes? And it's like, no. What we are now doing is, we have things like party buffs and all that. That's going to be toggleable. They're going to start as default to on. And you'll be able to toggle them off if they're bothering you. And they're changing the default portraits because people who don't mess with their adventure place, they thought looked a little dull. But when you have an umbrella out and then you mount up, when you get off of the mount, it should go back to having that umbrella on. Because remember, the fashion accessories were piggybacking off the mount system. They were acting like a mount.
Yeah.
And so when you dismount, it just thinks you're dismounted. Now it's like, no. I'll go back to having that out. And they are wanting a new feature where you will automatically pull whichever umbrella you want out when it begins raining.
Oh, that's nice.
So I thought that was really clever. When rain's detected, and they were like, well, should that count for snow? And then they were debating, and they were saying, well, I mean, if it snowed outside and I had an umbrella, I would open it. So they were kind of debating what that is. I can just tell you, my family has some pretty fair skin, and so they use umbrellas in the sun. So I would say, how many settings are you going to let us have here? And so kind of cool that they had that ability. And then actually, if you go to miscellaneous, check that out. Click on that.
I think it's
and read that. Ability to collectively entrust duplicates of stackable items to your retainer.
What does that mean?
So That means that if you had, for example, all of your red materia stored on a retainer and none of the blue materia, and in your inventory you had some red materia and some blue materia, there will be a button in your retainer inventory, and you'll click it, and it will deposit those reds onto those stacks. It's not going to assume that you want the blues out of your inventory, but it is going to assume that you want to merge everything over. There's a little dialog screen to verify that, but you click that, and it'll automatically collapse everything in. So if you keep all your crafting materials on one retainer, you can just go there when you've finished a bunch of crafting for the day that you had partial stacks of, and you can just toss all that on. So it works a lot like the way I use my New World inventory.
Okay.
So very, very, very neat.
Oh, nice. Okay. I think I understand what you're talking about.
He shows it off a little later, but because you're not watching gameplay, that section may not make sense. But really, really, really nice. So let's talk about job adjustments. This is where they wanted to start on the deep dives today. Paladin is the first one they went to because Paladin got a lot of changes. And so they need to talk about what the objectives were, because they're not going to be exhaustive today, but they are going to talk about the big notes of what drove Paladin. The first was that they thought that their burst damage was lacking, and some of their they had some weirdness with like damage over time. We need to pull some of that so that they can burst harder. So that when they're in these burst windows, because damage over time gets penalized by everybody who has these big burst windows. And then because we've synced everybody onto these like set windows of time, so long-term damage ends up falling behind. And then they also need more usable defensive abilities. And so they're messing with Goring Blade. They're messing with Blade of Valor. They're pulling a lot of those dots off, and they're helping align it with the other tank jobs where it felt like it was falling behind. So no more overwrite of sword. And then what's interesting is they actually brought back Bulwark.
Okay. We haven't seen that for a while, right?
So seeing Bulwark, seeing abilities get pruned, and then seeing them come back is something that we're seeing both like WoW and 14 do as these games age. It is this ability to, whether something's been gone briefly or something's been gone a long time, you can always, you don't have to invent a new ability to solve your problem. You can dig back to Bulwark. Chat's saying it was Stormblood the last time we had it. You can dig back to Stormblood and say, you know, what we need here is an ability we've already thought of and already works within the class fantasy. And we can just put that in, and that just handles that. So based around job adjustments, it's time to look at PvP. I don't know how many of the screenshots they ended up grabbing, but this map has a ridiculous number of mechanics on it. They've got tiles that when you run over become flipping tiles. They've got gold that drops once or twice per match that pushes up your limit break. They've got a big guy walking around slashing you for 9999999. They've got just a ridiculous number of mechanics. The mechanics won't be happening as often, but in trade, there are way more of them. So it should be really fun and casual in chat. While we were streaming it, they were like, this is going to really mess with ranked. And he said it would be really fun to have like custom matches in, like all ninjas or samurais or something. And then they showed off the new rewards. It was pieces of paper time. Not the beach gear. That looks like some Island Sanctuary, but the one after that is our series reward.
Oh, cool. Very nice.
So that's your series reward, but now it's time for the Alliance raid. Now when they're zoning in, they go ahead and show off the new UI theme, which is something that like it just feels like in general they've done a great job of really responding to a lot of the feedback.
Oh, that's clean.
Around how the game looks. It's actually see-through, so like you can see beyond it.
Yeah.
And they hope to add more colors to it in the future. So when we're in the new Alliance raid, they got a bunch of stuff to it.
A lot of different images.
Awesome. It looks awesome. I'm really excited about it. Graha is such a dork to travel with.
Beautiful. Absolutely stunning.
And during the internal check, they had to try to find people on the team who hadn't run it to make sure that it functions. Because I in my opinion, what Alliance raids do, and I don't know if New World has anything like this, right? That's the game you've been spending more time with.
Yeah.
Though I think for your total number of gaming hours, I'm probably relatively keeping up with you on total number of New World hours. So somebody said the other day, they're like, "How's he have time for so much New World?" And I was like, "I don't think he does. I think it's just less games in general."
Yeah, I get like maybe 5 to like 8 hours of game time a week if I'm lucky. So it's like, yeah, I chip away.
I'll play 8 to 10 hours of New World today, and I covered the live letter. So the lugs, like, so they like alliance raids, they were talking about testing it, and I don't know if New World has anything like this, but this 24-man content, like, it's just chaos, and it's meant to be clearable by people that have no idea what's going on.
Yeah.
And the music to it was a lot of what was playing in the second half of that trailer, we believe, and that was awesome. So as they show off the different sets to it and stuff, like, the rewards are nice and all that, but I think it's all about that immersion. And what excites me about odd numbered patches is I know, like, the 0.3 is not like the most rejoiced patch, right? As opposed to like 0.4, when we're starting to get into fan fest season, where there's kind of like two things going on: people hyped about what's going on in the game, and people hyped about what's coming. And so there was a bit of a Sky Mage meme at the beginning. And so as we get excited about that, like, the 0.3 kind of gets a little bit forgotten as you look back on old expansions sometimes. But I get really excited about this. I like alliance raids. And so I don't know if New World has anything like this. World of Warcraft, the closest thing is probably their LFR difficulty, where it's just shenanigans. And Guild Wars does this through like their open world meta events, where there's a large number of people and it's just chaos, and people are dying everywhere.
Yeah. So New World does not have anything that would be currently equivalent of an instance alliance raid. You have the open world raids that essentially happen, and based off of the amount of people who are participating in, it is always ever changing. This summer, they're adding in their first official raid, and we're getting raid UI, where essentially you can take the current max size for a group is 5, but they're going to allow you to connect 4 groups to have basically kind of a war band of like 20 people. And that will, we assume, apply to the instance raid that they're adding, but also to the open world like raid and content that they have as well. So like the equivalency isn't a 1-to-1, because like it's open world content versus like instance content, but the raid is an instance, and we've already kind of seen the boss teased off in Brimstone, but there is not a like a 20 or like a large person scale piece of content that isn't manually curated by the players right now.
Okay. Cool. Appreciate the context. So
yeah,
that was the first half. During the halfway point, they played some piano music from Keiko-san, playing the Omega music on piano. It was beautiful. And then Yoshi P said that there was this person called Yoshida working on the new Final Fantasy game, and he wanted to show the trailer, so I had to say yes. They showed a Final Fantasy 16 trailer.
I was so excited for 16. Oh my goodness.
He made a lot of jokes about this other Yoshida all day, and the producer Yoshida, everything in that trailer was real time. It was a beautiful trailer. It was real time off the PS5.
When you look at some of the like the struggles that Final Fantasy 15 had to go through, the PS5 really handles that. Their ability to transition from these primal summons and having these fights evolve from cutscene to gameplay, like, because of the speed of loading, that's a technology that they haven't had access to, and that's something that they'll be able to pull off. And you can go compare it to some of the bigger fights like in Final Fantasy 15, where like you're kind of just like waiting for everything, like you're hey, and then it's like you're just kind of like, as the system kind of tries to load in all the information and get ready for the fight itself, and then it persists. So I think a lot of people, I don't know if that's going to be something that a lot of people feel right away, but I think essentially when they kind of look back after their experience, they'll be like, wow, that was actually like really quick, really smooth transitions, and it will hopefully allow them to do something like that. I got actually a collector's edition of 16, so I texted you. I was like, you got to come when it comes in the mail. I need your help to decorate the wall with the map and with the like the flags and all the cool stuff that's going to be included in the box.
So with that, I think that says a lot about these games that start to say like they're really proud of their like 8 or 10 years in development. A lot of what's allowing 16 to have that success is that it's not going to be 16 years from the time it had the vision to the time it got done.
Yeah.
And that the people, they set the vision in stone and now they're just executing. And the people who were in the vision are still involved and they're just referring back to them. It's not, they're not moving the goalposts.
Yeah.
And that's allowed them to optimize the game for one set of hardware. It's not like you get halfway through and then you're changing hardware and all that. So I think a lot of that starts to really point out the weakness in these games. That it sounds like a great idea. Like you should spend 10 years perfecting your game, but that just causes an enormous number of problems, especially with these larger games that have dozens and dozens of devs. Some devs who work on it for 5 or 6 years, they weren't there at the beginning and they weren't there at the end. They're just lost in the middle somewhere. It's like, you need one group, start to finish.
Yeah.
It can't be defining of somebody's career. You can't get out of college and be like, what'd you do with your career? I worked on one game.
Well, it's like with 15, it had multiple restarts, like from scratch. They had to, and people were like, oh, it's versus 13. Like no. It's 15. It started over brand new. Like they had to toss out and from interviews, like the vast majority of all the work that came before it. And HR, like it's game development in such an interesting way. I always view it as a miracle that we actually get video games, because especially these AAAs, like, yeah, you can't lock somebody into like 10 years. Like maybe they'll be around, but they might want to go do something else. And, they should have the ability to move on. And that ends up becoming a managerial nightmare. And that's one of the things that I stated about Yoshi P when he took over Final Fantasy 14. I was like, wait till 16. You'll see the real impact of Yoshi P's leadership at Final Fantasy 16. I said this almost like a decade ago now. And to see kind of this come to fruition, and people were like, oh no, you'll see it. Like he had an impact on 15, but 15 was already well in development when that changeover and transition happened. So it's like, I do feel like there might have been a slight impact on 15, but I think that was like the true impact of Yoshi P's leadership on the Final Fantasy brand will be with Final Fantasy 16. Mark my words. And that is essentially what's going to be kind of put to the test this June, which I'm just unbelievably thrilled about. Like I really do hope, though, personally speaking, that because like when you look at 14 delivers content within the Final Fantasy franchise more than anybody else. I do hope that with 16's release, they can kind of get back to a normal cadence where you can see a Final Fantasy numbered game every couple of years, as opposed to having to wait like, every 5 or 6 or more years, because I think that's actually ultimately hurting the franchise in the long run. And it doesn't allow them to like address things. Yoshi P said with 16, they're focused in on like what they want the game to be, and it's not going to appeal to everybody. And that's perfectly fine. If they could follow up with 17 that could have different systems that might appeal to, like, you can end up just saying like, yeah, Final Fantasy, it's always changing, it's evolving, but here's some core pillar components that the game does deliver on each and every time. So even if you don't resonate with 16, 17's right around the corner, and 18, etc. And so I think that's going to be really interesting to see in the long run. Happy that he's wrestling with that other Yoshi P and being able to kind of showcase this. Do you think we'll see a 16 collab in 14 at some point?
Yes, absolutely. He mentioned somewhere in here that he was looking at doing more events both in game and out. Is kind of how it was phrased. A little fast and loose with that quote, but yeah, absolutely. Mm-hmm. Omega. They showed the opening cutscene. This was designed based on the interviews this week. This was designed by multiple encounter designers. Seems like each encounter was and designer was maybe given a phase. I'm sure they worked together on that. Tight little arena, and he said everything in this fight will be Omega. It's not supposed to be more difficult than DSR. They think it's less, but that's up to you. And so everything Omega has seen and experienced will be thrown at you. So if you want to prepare, you need to know all Omega Savage fights. So I'm sure we're about to see a massive sprint of a bunch of top end raiders doing minimum item level Omega Savage. And so should be really exciting to kind of see those phases and how those change.
Larbird and Harvard, baby.
So he went through and did a little bit of God mode on it. And it's called the Omega Protocol. So we could be seeing this called TOP, which it's nice to have abbreviations that are like pronounced. I like that Uwu's pronounceable and Ukob's pronounceable. So calling it top, I don't know. It's nice to have something that and isn't shared. Like Stormblood Shadowbringers was just a nightmare. SBSB, what are you doing?
What's happening here?
New treasure hunts. Treasure hunts are back. We're going back to the roulette wheel. These
Oh,
are
awesome.
Elpis only. So you're doing Elpis only, and he had some bad luck with these, so they set aside a lot of time for this segment, and he got kicked out a couple of times. But it's good to have those back. They showed off some of the cosmetics from it. We got to see some minions that we think are from it later and all that. Minion mountains that are from it, and like maps are just fun. They're just fun.
Oh yeah, those are always some of the best.
He even tried having
content.
the Final Fantasy 16 producer come in and take over because he has some skill, but there's nothing he could do about that. And once he got kicked out again, he says, "Turns out Final Fantasy 14 and Final Fantasy 16 producer were the same person after all."
The whole time.
But he just had bad luck so that we wouldn't have to. It was really a service, and to show us also just to kind of be really generous to us. He went into Leap of Faith after this and really just kind of showed us all the ways not to do it, because he really struggled with the fact that he went on controller today. So he was on mouse and keyboard, and then he was saying there was some lag. And so chat's like he's blaming hardware. He's blaming, so he had all these excuses. Chat was kind of making fun of him.
Controller player for life, baby.
And so he was really struggling. He fell down a lot. And he kept asking, he's like, "What am I even doing?" And Foxconn was like, you're supposed to be doing Leap of Faith. Like, you're doing the new map.
Yeah.
And you're running out of time. So
that's awesome.
But Deep Dungeon. Okay. So Deep Dungeon is going to function a lot like the old Deep Dungeons. So I don't know what you would want different from Palace of the Dead or Heaven on High if you were to kind of come back and try this. But basically it starts the same. You're gonna be 81 to enter every job, 1 to 4. It picks up off of you need to finish Endwalker and do Palace of the Dead to 50 to get in, so that you can understand the significance of the lore. The lore should cut off about level 30 based on the interviews. But they think that people will be speculating about the lore of the bosses, that there is a story being told with the bosses that are there. And it looks like it finishes with like a Bahamut thing. So I don't know what that is. We'll have to wait for people to get to the top or the bottom, as it were. And they're reusing an old NPC. So they're actually taking the weekly reward ARR Alliance raid NPC, clearing their quests. So they won't have quests anymore. And now they will have quests for this. So they just said, like, that's not being used anymore. So let's just delete those quests and make that now the Palace of the Dead giver.
Okay.
And the text lines will differ a bit whether or not you've done those quests or not. So just kind of a weird thing to like both delete that, but then have them be reused. But Ko there in Mordona will be our buddy. And they also say Omega Ultimate might feel more fun if you've completed the Omega side quests. So he came in to show us how this works. And it looks a lot like it. So you still have an Aether pool, with weapons and armor. You're still running around clearing floors. You're still getting treasure boxes. You're still getting palmanders. The map layout will slightly change. The boss encounters are supposed to be more meaningful. He still stepped on mines and traps, and but where he showed stuff off was the boss encounters did look a lot more meaningful. They felt, I don't know, there's something about him that's so gimmicky in such a narrow space that it reminds me of, but not the same as something like Criterion. Where it feels fun. I don't know how else to describe that. Bosja Zadnor felt fun, like those fates, like they felt like the mechanics mattered, but that I don't know, something about a dungeon feels like, okay, but we also just need to get through this. And these don't. So just at a glance, I don't know, we'll see. But that's what it looked like. But then you start to see the Palmanders get used, and they don't quite look the same. So instead of turning into like the big demon, you turn into a dreadnought, because it's all Allegan themed, right?
Yeah.
And so there's
no Manticore dreadnought. Do you also have Lust as well, like where you would be a succubus? Is it still succubus, or?
He didn't show us, so we didn't see everything. We just saw what he found. He showed us a hairstyle and stuff, but he did show us also, instead of having Magicite, you have these demi-clone generators.
Okay.
And the demi-clone generator actually fights alongside you.
Interesting. Okay, so it's not a one-off boom boom. It's I'm for this floor, I'm going to take a little friend with me.
Except the friend, if you click on that, maybe you'll recognize him.
Oh, sorry.
That was them.
Oh,
Oh,
they were sorry.
it's
Okay.
like I might recognize them
That
easier
looks
because
like a Doman clone.
yeah, so
Yeah, yeah.
from way back in Crystal Tower.
Yeah, exactly. That's cool. I like
So
that.
not everybody will immediately recognize
Algen
just
clone
because some
Doman.
of you cleared it in like 2013. So like like I have the advantage of having cleared it more recently.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
This
and then we
guy's
went to
head
map.
looks really small on this suit.
So
That's
new
cool.
hairstyle. We got to see some mounts at this
Yeah,
point.
the only
Mounts
thing
look
I
great.
really wanted in Deep Dungeon is kind of the lost action system, so that as players you can, because you know, a lot, we have people who challenge that, like as a solo play, and there are people who get those clears. It's just absolutely wild. Some of the coolest stuff. Like honestly, mad respect for people who like dedicate that time and are having that kind of fun. I think the lost action system giving you two kind of extra abilities would be interesting, especially if these bosses are just going to hit harder. But they didn't do it, and that's neither here nor there. I just was like, I love the lost action system. I always felt like it's like, yeah, having a little bit extra player choice in how you approach this piece of content. But that's cool. Like it's cool that they still brought, because it's the evolution of Heaven on High, instead of the materia, like having the clones with you, which is cool.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how long it takes people to get through
Mm-hmm.
solo clears. I'm sure they will
Yeah.
happen. Um, yeah, a lot of this didn't go that crazy. It's a point 0.3 patch. The crazy things are in the technical backend, the UI and all that. As well as like
Yeah.
just seeing what they can do within existing systems. Like it's minor things that are making big differences in your day to day. The ultimates are huge investments. So like these mounts look great.
Mm-hmm.
They look great, but like we have other great looking mounts. They are
Yeah.
adding two more gildeds.
Oh, they got,
Um,
so this would be
we
four
don't have the
gildeds, right?
prices yet. Yeah, so it would be up to four gildeds.
Okay.
So we got a gilded PvP gorilla and the gilded sheep. I don't remember where the sheep originally comes from. Um, and then we also got an MGP Zeppelin. Um, we got like an Allegan watermelon thing. Um, we got a bunch of cool ones. And then he showed us the retainer thing. Here's where I think it's the bigger stuff. So it's not as easy to get excited about as something like Bosges Adnor. But
Uh huh.
Bosges Adnor, while
Oh,
Eureka
I
stuff
see what you're
has had
talking
more of a
about.
life
Yeah.
that I thought it would have,
Yeah.
there are a substantial portion of players that old relics don't mean anything to. Like once something becomes an old expansion, it kind of dies. As opposed to stuff like this retainer system, while it's not as exciting in the short term to every player, this fundamentally changes the way every new and veteran player interacts with the game forever. And it would be hard to imagine going back on some of the quality of life changes we've already received over the years. It's hard to remember a time before they were there.
Yeah.
This is going to become the way you interact with retainers always, especially now that you can like cast glamours on your retainers while without removing their gear, and you can cast glamours on yourself from your retainer's gear. And so like there's all
Mm-hmm.
these little things that are just going to make the retainer system just less cumbersome.
Yeah.
Um, and that's good. Like it's really good. And he said like it only took us 10 years to add this. Uh, and so he did note that. So like they get into these housing systems and those are great. I'm glad people are excited about them.
Yeah.
But these UI updates, like these are major updates that mark big, meaningful updates. The new minions are super cute, but they're in with the other hundreds of great minions. So what I'm more excited about are these UI changes. The
Oh yeah.
damage being shown in the log, being able to see your allies' buffs, the retainer changes. These are the things that I think are going to fundamentally change the way you interact with every aspect of the game, not just in Endwalker, but in 7.0, in 8.0, in 9.0. These are going to linger. They're going to last. And I think that that's what's most exciting about the 6.3 live letter is, yeah, that's what's exciting.
That's absolutely exciting. You're right. Lot of really cool minions, a lot of really cool things to go after and collect on 6.3. And at the end of the day, like we know that going in to this leads into 6.4, which essentially takes the gear to its maximum level, which then leads into the fan fest. Like this is essentially kind of like, if this is your patch, this is going to give you a lot of content to do. If this is essentially like, you're like, well, I'm kind of like, this is going to lead into the next big hype cycle, next big sprint. And that's like, it's a good time essentially to like knuckle down and get things that you've maybe haven't done. And
Yeah,
then
you got to bear down for midterms.
Bear down. It's a bear. It's a bear. Fat dog it, dude. You got a fat dog it.
You got a fat
the
dog
dog's a bear.
So, yeah, and then we got new announcements. There's a Nier collab event. Always excited to push more Nier on the world, I guess. And then they're doing a New Year's Japanese Mahjong broadcast for Final Fantasy players that like Mahjong. And then this is where it got really exciting. Too soon, man. Too soon. So the 10th anniversary. Okay, next year they are going to be celebrating their 10th year. This is their big victory lap. This is going to start with these limited time pop-up shops selling moisturizing cream in Japan. That was our merch for today. It was moisturizing cream. There's always something. Nobody had moisturizing cream on their Final Fantasy 14 merch bingo card.
Yeah.
Nobody. You are lying if you say moisturizing cream was on there. There will be the Japanese Crystalline Conflict Cup. I'd love to see them do more of these synced up with the FanFest personally.
Yeah.
And then this is where I started to get really exciting. The Eorzean Symphony. So the album's for sale. Get your orchestrons. Enjoy that.
Mm-hmm.
However, it is time for the Eorzean Symphony to go back on tour worldwide.
Nice.
They are coming to the United States.
Woohoo.
They are going to Europe. But what is exciting about it is the next slide. They will be happening the day after FanFest.
Oh, that's
in the
great.
same cities.
Oh,
as
that's
FanFest.
perfect. That's so smart. Oh, that's so smart.
Different venues,
yeah,
because it has to move to a concert hall.
I gotta go to the symphony for Final Fantasy VII, and it was
one of them.
Mind blowing. I absolutely loved it, and that would be great. So if I'm able to go to FanFest, then absolutely, that's going to be something that's like, yep, going to stay an extra day, which will be nice because it always kind of felt like a rushing out of Vegas to make it back home. It's like, oh man, I wish I could just stay another day.
And that brings us to, when does Japanese FanFest have? This is the date I missed. I said January 27th. They said early 2024 was what they said.
Mm-hmm.
It is way early. The 7th. I was off by 3 weeks.
Yeah, that's really early.
That's really early. So I had said a March launch. I know a lot of people have been thinking maybe we'd be looking at a like April to summer launch.
I was thinking April.
Actually, March is looking pretty good now. But maybe we'll see. I don't remember my exact date, but I think I'm end of March for the launch.
Okay.
And it will be at the Tokyo Dome, which is for perspective, the translator said is like finding out it's at Madison Square Garden.
Mm-hmm.
As far as the impression, it seats 55,000 is my understanding.
Oh wow!
So hopefully that gets a decent number of fans inside. You never know. I mean, the problem is like when BlizzCon holds like 30 or 40,000, and it is a rush to get tickets. So as we get back into these happening. But there are no details on FanFest yet. I don't remember when they start telling us that tickets are going on sale.
I would assume that we're gonna start hearing about that probably in February.
I was like, maybe it's today, but I think it's too early. But we're also running out of live letters that happened before FanFest. Like there's only a couple left.
I think they get 6-3 out, and then that's when they start kind of talking about it, especially in the new year for 2023. Okay. That would be my personal guess, because it'd be really difficult to get that information out on the 23rd of December, right? Like people have already probably spent their money. Like, so you don't announce and be like, hey guys, I know you all like spend all your money on Christmas, and you want to wait till January when everybody's like, all right, now I've had a little bit of time to breathe after the holiday spending spree.
Yeah. Chris in chat thinks that they're 100 days before FanFest. And so backing that up kind of 3 months, that puts that in that March, April timeframe. Which in the March, April timeframe, you'd be looking at, if I go look at patches, I have my thing up here. You'd be looking at like right around sometime between 6.35 and 6.4. So maybe the 6.4 live letters, which we have 2 of. One will be 11 days before patch 6.4, which I predicted for May 23rd, and one will be substantially before that for the part 1. With 6.3, remember, automatic demolition. We said that already, but just enter your house. And then Final Fantasy 14 is hiring. They're looking for a North American marketing manager.
Very nice.
So exciting there. And Yoshi said you'll have a lot of interactions with me if you join this team. And then Heaven's Turn is next week. So get your reindeer if you want it before that's gone. And then Heaven's Turn will be here. And then it'll be time for the patch note reading. This will not be a full 24-hour maintenance. And then another announcement for Final Fantasy 16. So you've already pre-ordered yours, Brian.
Oh, yeah.
All right. So pre-orders are now being accepted. And then they went ahead and put some links to PlayStation 5 supply chain articles for specifically Japan.
Yeah, makes sense.
And
we want you to have a PS5. That's going to be the most interesting things about 16 specifically. We can kind of toss back just to us as we kind of wrap up, because this was just an epic amount of information. But with 16, in terms of it, like I hope that there's a couple of commas in that check from PlayStation, because you are limiting like the amount of people who can purchase it. And then the question and the hope is that as it rolls out to other platforms, that more and more people are going to be like, oh yeah, I'm absolutely in. But there's also the risk of like, oh, that was kind of hyped and I kind of got my feel of it, you know, or something like that. So I'm really hoping that 16 does numbers, because I want more Final Fantasy, right? I want a 17, I want an 18. And I do hope that check from PlayStation to lock it down too, because it is getting me to buy a PS5, right? Like I've actively been on the hunt. I've sold some stuff, so I have some cash on hand that I can, if I find one, I can just grab it, and let's go. You know, like I'm thrilled. Like I'm excited because I really want to play 16. But you know, so clearly the exclusivity works, and it's kind of funny too, because this is also a time when I own the game before I owned the console, because that was Final Fantasy 7 and the PlayStation for me as a kid. Like I didn't have the money for the PlayStation, but I could afford 7, so I bought it. And I just held on to it until I was able to afford.
He was asked if there'd be a PS5 bundle for the 16. And he said, right now we're just trying to get the game shipped. We're already aware of a shortage. Like there's no need to introduce cogs.
That's why I went with the collector's edition. I kind of, when I saw the price on that, I was like, oh yeah, they got some really cool stuff. They got the Phoenix statue and more, and that will go real well. Can't see it on screen, but it'll go with my Endwalker Moon and other gaming memorabilia. So
in his closing statement was, with the Christmas holiday soon, New Year's soon, we're entering the 10th anniversary year for Final Fantasy 14 since A Realm Reborn, and it makes me think a lot. I said back then that I want to do this for 10 years. Actually, reaching that as an MMO is amazing, and we have plans for the next 10 years now. There are announcements I would love to share with you, but can't yet at this point. Thank you for spending this year with us, and I'm looking forward to next year with you guys. I hope you have a nice, healthy holiday. Merry Christmas and Happy New Year.
That's awesome, dude. And then on the 1st, he should have his traditional written up letter for you to kind of jump into. And I got kids apparently like at the door waiting for me. Dude, that's awesome, man. I know you're going to be excited to jump into 6.3. I think that's going to be a lot of fun. What are you going to tackle first as kind of a final thought before we wrap up today's show?
Well, I want people to enjoy the story with me, so I'll stall on that so that so the people who are quick enough through it, will try to get through that a little bit later, is kind of my initial thought. And then part of me says go tackle maybe some of the crafting gathering weapons. And so that should be a good time. Try to set some of that story off to the side and do that. And then jump into the new PvP, because it's been really hard to want to grind the PvP series this late in it. So I want to get that out of the way earlier. I kind of regret missing that. So I'll do that a lot earlier on and go hard up front. They give you a long time. They give you 4 months, but then that ends up being with closing weeks. You're like, oh crap, I got 10 levels to go. And so I'd rather just kind of have that done and buttoned up.
Put it in the pocket.
And then the Alliance raid, day 1 Alliance raid. I know that story, but you know, day 1 Alliance raid, there is nothing more fun, in my opinion, in all of 14 than watching people get yeeted and deleted by stuff they did not see coming. That hand just made me smile so many times. Yeah. So that will be absolutely a day 1 thing. I love watching people get deleted day 1. It's so fun. I'll do it the first time for the lore and everything, but after that, I just want to do it for the lulz. I like watching people die. I don't care if it's me. I don't care if it's the people that came with me. I don't care if it's strangers. I just think it's so funny, and it's not like Criterion where like you,
That's
or
so funny.
Savage, where you're worrying like, am
Yeah.
I wasting people's time? No, we're gonna get the clear.
Yeah.
You're fine. You're just dead. And it's just funny. And so I just have a good time watching.
Yeah.
You know, you see like the big hammer coming down, and 20 people move to the side. The remaining 4 just get wiped, and it's just I just like it. I like playing games with other people, and the Alliance Raid is something I absolutely look forward to.
Awesome. Well, guys, thanks so much for hanging out with us. Julie says that we could actually do a Monday show. I don't know if you have plans on the 26th. I don't want to commit you to it, so we could talk to it offline. Otherwise, we'll be back on Tuesday. It was just a matter of a question of like timing, etc. But it is the holidays, so from Work2Game, we guys wish you a happy holidays, Merry Christmas, Happy New Year. We'll be back next week with these talk shows as well. So if you guys have topics and things like that you want us to kind of jump into, make sure we cover, in terms of the discussion, especially around MMORPGs, be sure to sign off in the comments, hit us up on Discord, follow us on Twitter, and all that cool social media nonsense, etc. So right now Chris is going to be continuing on over New World, and I'll be taking over today at 4:30 as well, and we're going to be carrying that over into the evening. So guys, we're going to wrap up. I'm going to hit end broadcast and let it kind of wave itself out. So we'll hopefully see you over on Twitch, and otherwise we'll see you next week.